Okay, so we're going to do a quick little visual comparison between the two generations of Oldsmobile rocket motors here. On the left, we've got a what I believe is a 1949. It's going to be a 303, so that's going to be the short deck version. On the right here, I've got a 71 455 that I pulled out of a Oldsmobile 98 that was in the junkyard. We'll talk a little bit about the dimensions here first, and then kind of do, you know, like a top-down comparison between the two. So first thing you'll probably notice is that the first gen is considerably bigger dimensionally than the second gen, even though it's a much smaller displacement. This one measured about, from like the end of the cylinder head to the end of the cylinder head, I'm getting about 26 inches here, maybe just a little less than 26. The second gen here was 23 head to head, sideways like that. So pretty significant width difference of 3 inches there. On the first gen, this one actually has the bell housing sticks out pretty far on the back there, if you can see that. And from end to end going forward to back, get about, it's like 29 to the pad where the second piece of the water pump goes in there from end to end. That's a pretty long motor. And then on this one, it doesn't stick out very far on the bell housing. This one to the, well, there's no water pump on here, but if there was, it would be about 26 inches. So it's about 3 inches less wide and about 3 inches shorter, which is pretty considerable difference as far as like the displacement goes from a, you know, 5 liter to a 7.5 liter. So starting at the top, this one uses, it's like an air gap style intake where there's like a open space under here, kind of cool, sporty. This one would have come with a 2-barrel, obviously. There was a 4-barrel option for these, but that pad sticks up really high where the where that carburetor would sit compared to the 455. It actually sits lower than the valve covers, which may be good or bad depending on how you look at it. As far as height goes on this one, from that carb pad to the where the oil pan mounts, we're looking at like almost 21 inches, it looks like, versus the 455. The highest point is actually going to be the top of the valve cover at like, what's that, about 16 inches up. Well, I guess the oil fill, 17 for the oil fill. So considerably shorter as well. This one is sat a little bit higher up on the engine stand there, just because of the way the bolts were positioned, the bolt holes for the transmission. Then we'll move down. I guess the valve train would be next. This uses shaft style rockers like this one here. Not much to say about that. There they are. The valves where they, I guess, seat, the valve spring seats, is pretty high up on here, so the valve cover itself is pretty tall. There's a good view on that. And then on the second gen, it uses these, I don't know what you call this, but there's like a support going between the two, and more, I guess, traditional style would be just whatever that thing's called. But these ones, the spring seat is actually sunk down into the head pretty good, meaning that the valve covers sit pretty low profile on these things. There's a good view on that. The springs are a lot wider, like that. Rockers are a lot bigger. These are stamped, whereas these appear to be cast. Then kind of the moving down to the cylinder head itself. The cylinder heads on the first gen are enormous. I mean, that thing's like 9 inches. This one we're looking at 7, and those cylinder heads make this thing heavy, like seriously heavy. It's actually bowing the engine stand that I have it on right there. It does have manifolds on it too, so that's adding to the weight. But yeah, big old cylinder heads, especially for how small those valves and all that are. But if you look at the positioning of the spark plugs on this, these spark plugs on the first gen are set like inboard, both together of the exhaust. Center exhausts being Siamese there, and these exhaust runners stick out a lot compared to the second gen here. And on the second gen, the spark plugs are actually set off to either side of the exhaust ports, meaning that the total length of the manifold from end to end here is a lot shorter than on this one, where it runs the entire length of the motor basically, since the runners are on the ends there. The angle of them is about the same where the ports come out. I believe the second gen's a little bit more tilted downward, and the manifolds on these do sit, when it has them, do sit a lot more flush with the block like this, adding to, you know, the kind of compactness of the setup, whereas these ones kind of protrude out a lot there. Getting to the water pumps. The water pumps on these totally different. This one's a 2-piece, you can see here, whereas on the second gens it's a 1-piece and a lot smaller. The timing chain cover, I guess, is super flat on these ones, and on this one it appears that, I can't tell if it's 2 pieces, but the water pump might be 1 piece with the timing chain cover, and that thing sticks out considerably. It's almost like they, on this block, they have it like kind of casted into the block where the timing chain sits back in there, and on this one almost like it's protruded out more of a, I mean, it's like a separate piece. Yeah, interesting. Fuel pump on this one goes like, I think it goes upside down looking compared to like a small block Chevy, but the 2 bolts are top and bottom rather than like side to side. The first gen here, it's gonna be kind of hard to see, but let me see if I can, I don't know if that's gonna work, but if you can see it, the bolts go side to side. The fuel pump mounts in the same spot, but yeah, they're on either side of it, not top and bottom. Not sure if that caught, but distributors mount in the same spot. This one, I just got a little plug there, because there's no distributor in it, but there's that. There's a good view on that distributor. That thing's cool. So at the ends of each cylinder head on the first gen here, there's coolant passage. That one's blocked off with this little plate here, but on the second gen, those actually come up through the intake. This one's blocked off by the intake, but there's like the heater where that comes out, yeah, through the intake. Let's see here. what else can we talk about on the top end? The thermostat housings, totally different. On this first gen here, there's the bypass for before the thermostat opens is this like hard line that comes out of the crossover there. Whereas on the second gens, it's got a built-in tube onto the thermostat housing that would come down and attach to the water pump there. You'd use like a soft rubber line would come off of a second fitting that's on there. Both of them have this big oil fill on the front. That one actually goes into this like timing cover water pump combo piece, whereas this one goes straight into the block through that integrally casted like timing housing area. On the front of the first gen, on these cylinder heads, there are no accessory mounting holes, whereas on the second gen, you got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on each cylinder head there. Let's see. Motor mounts, completely different. On the first gen, the motor mount is a single right here on the front. I'm not sure, I think the transmission on this one, or even the plate right there on like how it's kind of flat right there, I think that might even have a support to it or something. It's either gonna be on the trans or that, like to keep it from doing this kind of motion. But yeah, single front mount on that. Whereas on the second gens, you have these two bolt holes right there and right there where the mounts would go on either side. And there's what's left of a heat shield there. Looking at the sides of the block here, the freeze plugs on this first gen here are staggered like 1, 2, 3. Something kind of interesting I noticed on both of these blocks is that it's kind of hard to see from here, but like that, each cylinder is kind of like almost shaped into the outside of the block. There's like these divots, which is kind of interesting because I was looking at the 5.3 LS like truck motor, and it has that same kind of shape to it, but I haven't really seen many other motors that are like that. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 3 freeze plugs. These ones are set all in between cylinders on this second gen. So and they're straight across also. So if you look at this one, that one's set, the rear one is set like on the cylinder, middle one's set in between the two, that one's set like on the cylinder. Kind of interesting, but yeah, 3 freeze plugs. The oil filter mounting position is both pretty similar between these two. Not the same, but similar. And it's, yeah, on this back passenger side corner here. And it's this adapter kind of deal that bolts on because from what I read, they did that on the second gens because it had to be also used in front wheel drive applications. So they would use a different shaped mounting for the oil filter there. But then if we can get a good view up, can we see it from here? Kind of. there's the oil filter housing. This one uses a canister type, like you open it up and replace the gut of it, whereas the second gens are all going to use a spin on. Let me see if I can crawl back here and see this from the back. Kinda, yeah, kinda. Let's see. Not really. Well, I think that's as good as it's gonna get. Yeah, it's a piece that bolts on right there, and then the filter mounts onto it going forward. Whereas the filter on this one mounts going straight down. Okay. So, I mean, as far as stuff I noticed, just looking at these things, that's kind of the main stuff that's different. Yeah. Very different motors, for being, you know, for like 2 different generations. It's a lot of changes. I have, over here I have a 455 that's installed in an Oldsmobile 98. We'll take a look at that over here. Here's what it looks like sitting in the car. There's a lot going on in here, I know. It's a work in progress. But, I mean, the dimensions of these things are pretty small. It doesn't really take up all that much room. I mean, you see something like big block Chevy, it's just an absolute behemoth of a motor to be squeezed into like a passenger car like this. But, yeah, you can see how the accessories would mount. Here, there's the water pump. You can see it's not very long sitting on there compared to the first gen. Here's the bypass I was talking about. Use a rubber line. It's like 2 outlets on the thing. One of them comes out before the thermostat, this one out after, obviously. But yeah, there it is. Can compare it to this. Here's a small block Chevy, how it sits in the bay of a similar vehicle. This is Impala. That's a 98 there.